Hello and welcome to Legally Speaking with me, Tarun Nangia. Today we are doing a very special show that we have titled 93 Not Out, A Lifetime in Law. This is on the life of senior advocate K.K. Venugopal, who served as the Attorney General of India. And we're going to speak to a range of people who have worked with him in the past and have lifelong relationship with him. They are his friend, they are his, in a sense, people who have briefed him, worked with him. And as we all know that when you have such a long contribution to the field of law, there are so many people that you come in touch with, and some in the sense there are people who truly know you personally, how you are, professionally, what kind of cases you have done. All of this and more we'll reflect on 93 Not Out, A Lifetime in Law, the journey of senior advocate K.K. Venugopal. We welcome now somebody, my guest, who has, in a sense, worked with him for long years. Good to see you, sir, and welcome to Legally Speaking. So,
pleasure talking to you, Tarun.
And if you could, for our audience, in a sense, reflect on your journey with senior advocate K.K. Venugopal. It is when you first entered his office, and when was this? And then we move on.
I have known him for 2/3 of my life. That's 50 years.
50 years.
I first met him on 9th June 1974.
Yes.
When my father accompanied me to him, because my father used to brief him occasionally.
Yes.
And when I had left my job with DCM and I wanted to practice as a lawyer, so I expressed my interest to join Mr. Venugopal. So he took me to his house on New Avdi Road in Chennai. And then after talking to me for some time, he said, you come to the chamber on 13 June 1974. That was the day the court was reopening, Madras High Court. So I went to him. He asked me to study some briefs and make notes, and I gave it to him. And in the next 15 days, he asked me to come to his office and start working. It has been, I think, a tremendous experience so far as I am concerned, and from a senior, he is now a very good friend and well-wisher. I think, a remarkable person, because he lives his life fully, not a hypocrite. He enjoys his drink every evening. He has his 4-course meal, starting with the soup,
is it?
Wine, everything. So, I mean, every vacation he will take off. And when I joined, this was unusual. Normally lawyers work even during vacation, but for him, the vacation means within a day or two, he and his wife, they will fly first class to various parts of the world, enjoy. That was his life, and that has continued. Of course, his wife passed away. It's now almost more than 40 years since his wife passed away. But he has continued, even though he's a single person, he has managed his house, managed his life in the same manner, and I don't think his lifestyle has changed. So, and the most important thing is he keeps himself fit. Those days when I joined him, he used to go horse riding.
Horse riding?
Horse riding. He will go to the...
In Chennai?
In Chennai. Govind Swaminathan used to be there. He will go there to the race club. He will ride horses. He has fallen also.
Okay.
And then had to stay away from court for some time, which was not very... He has written about it in his diary. And then swimming regularly, riding a bicycle. So he keeps himself fit. Even today, he does his yoga. And therefore, you see him walking to parties without support even today, and comes and spends time. May not be much time. And he avoids coming to court because of the fear of infection, more particularly after COVID. Otherwise, he's fit enough to come and stand and argue, which he will happily do, but for this fear.
So you told me that you joined him in Chennai, and now I see you and him in Delhi. So he offered you to come along with him to Delhi, or you came independently?
1978, Mr. Shantibhushan had called him and asked him to become a law officer, additional solicitor general. Mr. Sorabji was first additional solicitor general, and he wanted one more because there were far too many cases to handle. So then he accepted. In fact, Mr. J.P. Goyal, who was a senior advocate and was a socialist close to part of the government at that time, he had first asked him, and then Mr. Shantibhushan had spoken. And so he had to join sometime in December. So Mrs. Venugopal and I, we were thinking, I at that time was somewhat superstitious about good dates and all that. So I suggested to him, why not we go on Makar Sankranti, 14th of January. So Mrs. Venugopal also agreed with me, and on Pongal Day, 14 January 1979, he shifted. So he asked, at that time he must have had about 12 to 15 juniors, starting from Manivannan, Krishnappan, Chidambaram, Rangarajan, Kumaramangalam, Krishnamani, so many of them, all stars. And none of them was willing to shift base and come to Delhi. Delhi was not a place which was familiar, and they were not sure how they'll be able to live a life here. I had lived in Delhi for 3.5 years. I had joined as a senior management trainee in DCM in
Earlier,
70.
before joining him?
Yes, in 70. So I knew something about living in Delhi, and I was not, I was quite happy to take the risk. I had earlier burnt my boats as an executive and shifted legal profession. So I was, 5 years there, started getting my own work, but I was not unhappy. I was quite willing, and then shifted with him and came here. Then later on, of course, Krishnamani also shifted.
Tell me one thing, because you worked with him so long. What was his style of being briefed? Was he angry? Was he short-tempered? How was he then? I mean, now of course.
I don't think I have seen him being angry much, not with junior colleagues.
So he's very cool, calm
Very
person.
cool, very cool. And he will encourage. Of course, if there are mistakes, he will point out, and that he should. See, I think basically he's a person who assesses the person who meets him, his junior colleagues, and he's able to know what he is capable of. Therefore, he used to assign the work based on the capability of the person.
Okay.
So, therefore, his expectations will be realistic. And on that basis, I think he has been able to manage. So, he is able to judge, assess. In Tamil, there is a saying, what Thiruvalluvar said, Idanai idanal ivan mudikum endraindu adane avan kanvidal. That is actually the theory of delegation is summarized in these 7 words by Thiruvalluvar.
Okay.
So I think he has that ability to assess people, and on that basis,
Yeah.
he has that uncanny ability to assess people, and then who will be able to carry out the particular assignment.
Okay.
And on that basis, he asks the person to work on a particular kind of brief. And therefore, his expectations are realistic. And normally, he is not a person who will get unduly ruffled. And, his style of work is he doesn't go through the brief fully himself. He relies heavily on his juniors to brief him, but he is able to pick out the points on which he wants assistance, and he needs more elaboration, and he will ask, and he will get it. So, by and large, he is not a person who will get unduly hassled or
if there is 2 or 3 things that you learned from him when you worked with him, I think 50 years ago, close to 50 years ago.
Yes.
What would those be? If you feel that you learned something from him, what did you learn?
Topmost, I think, is integrity.
Okay.
He is a person of utmost integrity and honesty. See, whenever any new brief comes, he'll first ensure that there is no conflict of interest. He is not a person who will give one opinion to one party and appear for the other side. Not settle brief person and appear for the other side. He is extraordinarily concerned about his reputation for integrity, honesty, and he won't therefore, whatever be the temptation, he won't. Second, I think, is his conscious, very hardworking and conscientious, and therefore he will deliver his best, whatever he can, and not bothered about the result. Yes, all of us, when we argue matters, we expect we will succeed, but I think he does his duty, and thereafter, whatever the results, he takes it in. I don't think he's too much affected by that.
Okay.
So these are some of the things as a professional we learn, and he spares time for his own life, for his family. He never is bothered so much that he has to work every day, earn money. He says, if I earn money, I must spend money well. I must enjoy my life. And that he does. His clothes, he has the best of clothes, best of life. He has an army of servants. He has a number of houses. He has a house here, Delhi, farmhouse, Bangalore, Chennai, Bangkok, Dubai. He enjoys. He goes and
He lives his life.
lives his life, and he has his own people who will be there for because he likes good food. So his staff have grown up with him.
Okay.
In fact, young boys who used to join.
Is that
him,
a quality about him?
That's an excellent. I mean, I think he supports them. He looks after them well. He supports the families, the medicine, the health, education of the children. So they are all loyal to him, and therefore they have grown up with him, and therefore, he shares his wealth with all of them.
You've kept in touch with him?
Sorry?
You have kept in touch with him?
Yeah, throughout. In fact, even now, Parag Tripathi, one of his other associates, and we make it a point to spend time with him once a month, have dinner in his house. We travel together. In fact, we used to, lots of people, when he was UAE president, Santosh Hegde, Amal Ganguly, and myself, Parag sometimes, we have all traveled together.
Okay.
And even as late as, I think, 5-6 years ago, we went on a wine trip.
Okay.
We went to Venice, we went to Lake Como, and he's good company. He's fun to travel with. We have been to his house in Bangkok. He's not the run-of-the-mill lawyers who is only concerned about law and legal profession. He enjoys life, he reads, he listens to good music, Carnatic music every day.
Carnatic music every day?
Yes, every day.
One thing I want to know, for a man who at the age of 93 argues in the Supreme Court, what is that quality about him that has allowed him to go on for so long? Many people give up in their 70s, some in their 60s, some in their 80s. He is in his 90s.
His zest for life is, he wants to be useful to society, he wants to contribute, he wants to be active because he doesn't want to, he wants his brain to be active, his physique to be active. Therefore, he has never looked at it as something which bores him or tires him. He enjoys what he does.
You told me he was fond of horse riding when he was younger. Yeah. We knew Fali Nariman was a stickler for his evening walk. Does he also have such quirks now? He goes for a walk every day, something of that sort?
No, he does only whatever he does at home, yoga.
Home. Yes.
But till almost 5-6 years ago,
yes.
I think he used to spend time. Yes, he used to swim.
Yeah.
Therefore, he wants to keep himself very active in physical life also.
As a last question, I would want to ask about him, that if you would like to turn him, that here is a man who is so and so and so, what would you like to say? I mean, something that comes to your mind.
I think he's a model for the legal profession. See, his office has spawned so many persons, not merely in the field of law, so many senior advocates, judges, judges of Supreme Court, judges of High Court, but cabinet ministers, politicians.
Is it?
Yes, like Chidambaram, Rangarajan.
Is it from his office?
Yes, they are his chamber juniors.
Okay.
So many of them, and I think he has allowed everybody to grow. It is not as if he has insisted on their talents being available only for him. In fact, he encourages everyone who joins him as a junior to develop his own work. And they follow him. We all see him, the way he works. And we all have grown up because of him, because of the encouragement that he has given. Hardly 4 months after I joined him, when he was appearing in the detention matters, because MISA had been amended, large number of people had been detained. He was busy in Madras. His father, Mr. Nambiar, was busy in Bombay, Delhi, Supreme Court. And he had a number of persons who had briefed him for matters in Bangalore. When he found that he was not able to be in both places, he asked me to go and start the matter. And I had just joined about 5 months ago, but he had the confidence, he had assessed, and he was confident that I'll be able to do it. Went there and started the matter, and next morning he joined. See, that kind of encouragement and opportunity, you don't get it with everyone. Okay. I think for 50 years I have known him, and I'll be very happy if I continue to have this kind of interaction for several more years.
Senior Advocate CS Vaidyanathan, you are in the sense one of India's top advocates in your own right, but having so fondly remembered your association with your senior, and one good thing which you shared with every one of us, that how you still keep in touch with him, you still have warm relations. So these are relationships of a lifetime, and on 93 Not Out, A Lifetime in Law, the story of KK Venugopal, you have certainly provided certain anecdotes and certain inputs which all of us will cherish. I would like to thank you for your time.
Thanks, Tarun.
Thank you.
It has been a pleasure to share some of my thoughts about Mr. Venugopal with you.
Thank you. So here was our esteemed guest sharing all the anecdotes about his first senior, which is Senior Advocate CS Vaidyanathan, and we now move on to the next person who will now speak about KK Venugopal on 93 Not Out. Thank you. So now on 93 Not Out, where we discuss eminent jurist KK Venugopal, who, as we said in our introduction, argues at the Supreme Court even today, and that too for more than in even an hour at length, where he can stand and argue. That is an achievement. And we are joined by somebody whose law firm briefs the biggest and the most successful counsels in India, somebody who's a veteran of the law firm industry, somebody who's known top lawyers in India and briefed them since say the early 80s to even now. Let me welcome Mr. Raian Karanjawala, Managing Partner of Karanjawala and Company, one of India's top litigation law firms at the Supreme Court of India. Good to see you, and thank you for your time. So at the outset, when I say KK Venugopal, what all comes to your mind?
So, see, first I must be very candid. I won't be able to give you the perspective of a person who has spent time in his chamber or been his junior either here or in Madras and so on. But there was a point of time when our law firm worked with him very intensely in what was one of the very big cases of that time called Swadeshi Politic. And that is when I first interacted with Mr. Venugopal in some detail. Now you must remember that Venugopal was part of what was called the triumvirate of his generation. Just as today, when you talk about triumvirate of my generation, which is people who are within 65, 68, 69 years of age, three names come to mind. Mukul Rogi, Abhishek Singhvi, Harish Salve. Not necessarily in that order, but these three are the names that come to mind because Sybil himself is half a generation or a generation earlier. Venugopal was part of the triumvirate of his generation. Fali Nariman, Soli Sorabji and K.K. Venugopal. And they were a sheer contrast which was worth observing. Nariman and Sorabji, as you know, came from the Bombay bar. Nariman came to the Supreme Court somewhere in the year 72 as an additional Solicitor General. Both Sorabji and Venugopal came as additional Solicitor General in the Moraji Desai government in the year 77. And we used to brief all of them all the time in the early days, and I personally went for many such, conferences, and they were all a contrast in behavior. The Bombay councils were always a little more difficult to deal with. If you went to Farina Iman's conferences, first of all, they were pretty haphazard in the sense that nobody had an exact slot. People came in, everyone was called at 8:30. Nariman was in his room, you were waiting outside whether it was the heat or it was the cold in the garden because his office used to be in the back of his house and you entered from his front garden, went to his back garden and entered. And the conferences used to be chaotic because he'd be trying to absorb everything in a short span of time which he was to give you. And come on, yeah, like that. Sorabji's was a more slightly calmer interview and a slightly calmer conference, but Sorabji also had his eccentricities, was a little kitsch-pitchy, wasn't too, could get irritable a little easily, and also was very finicky. If you had a cough or a cold, you were chucked out in 1 second because he didn't want to catch your cold and lose work for 1 week. Venugopal was a complete contrast. Very calm, very methodical, and unlike the offices of especially Nariman, and to some extent even Sorabji, his office functioned like clockwork. Nothing, you see, for example, you went and briefed Nariman, you found that on the next occasion the brief was not there, and his people said, we returned it to you, our people said, no, you, and so on. It used to go on. Sorabji also was not that well organized. Venugopal was completely well organized, and unlike the Bombay Council, he always believed in having top-notch staff. His drivers were the best, his clerks were the best, totally on the ball, everything was meticulously organized, meticulously planned. And Venu had a very sort of methodical, driven way of preparing and arguing. He would go step by step. I hear you, I say, what is it? Okay, yes, okay. And his mind, Rohinton, who worked with him, said it was like a computer. Things would just keep falling into place. While you think he wasn't absorbing as much as you thought, it was absolute. And in court, he was outstandingly brilliant. Also, Venugopal was, at a personal level, very easy to get along with person, but simultaneously would brook no nonsense from anybody. So any member of his staff went out of line, sacked immediately, or virtually sacked immediately. The ship was very soft-spoken, very smooth sailing, but very tight. That was the contrast of these three. We had worked with Venugopal in what was known as the Swadeshi Politic matter. Swadeshi Politic was a big company and it was being taken over, and there were three councils. Venu was in the lead, then there was Anil Diwan, and then there was Ashok Desai. And that was the first matter in which Venugopal broke the barrier of fees that Motilal Setalvad had settled years ago as Attorney General for India. He had said that for a final hearing, a counsel will charge in the Supreme Court 1,650. For an appearance, a counsel will charge in the court 1,040. Venu talked to us, and the stakes were so high that we radically agreed, and that barrier was broken. This was somewhere in the year 1983. And then after that, people stopped adhering to that rule. And then, somebody raises fees, and somebody raises fees, and somebody raises fees, and so on. Venugopal himself, as you know, has been also the other contrast that Venugopal had with both Fali and Soli was that Fali's father was an insurance salesman. Soli's father was a rich businessman. Venugopal's father was an extremely illustrious constitutional lawyer, M.K. Nambiar. In fact, M.K. Nambiar had argued the first important case in the Supreme Court on fundamental rights in A.K. Gopalan. The argument that he had raised at that time was that there should be procedural fairness. Due process doesn't only mean that a process has to be followed, it must be procedurally also fair. The argument was not accepted by the court in Gopalan's case, but many years later, 28 odd years later, in Maneka Gandhi, his argument was accepted. Equally, in A.K. Gopalan, Mr. Nambiar laid down the foundation of what was then the argument accepted later in Keshav Nanda Bharati of what is the basic structure of the constitution. So Venugopal himself came from an extremely illustrious legal family, and I think that also showed somewhere in his behavior. On a personal level, very pleasant, always up for adventure. I still remember we were in Murli Bhandari's house when we used to drink and everything, and suddenly in the bar there was a whiskey. I think it was whiskey. I know there was vodka. I think it was whiskey with a snake in it.
Oh.
And everybody, Murli mischievously tried to offer it to people. Anybody wanted. The only one I think who that day sipped it and tried it out was Venugopal himself.
Oh.
So he was always up for adventure. Very adventurous, at a certain level very young at heart, always going for the latest in, gym gadgets and things, kept very fit. He was a horse rider. Soli, for example, Fali was also kept himself fit, but Fali basically just did one thing, walk.
Yes.
Venugopal had all-round fitness, was a horse rider, everything, and that is why probably today, at the age of 90, he's still going strong. He still has the energy and so on. And everything above him was just a cut above the rest. He was very generous. He spent a lot of money. He didn't waste it, but he spent a lot of money. Everything in his house was of an extremely good quality. And he was also, and is also, a very personable man. And very nice to know, and a person one has a lot of admiration for. And also very principled. He said something, he stuck to it. He was a man of great honor. And the bar has been very fortunate to have him with them for so long, especially the Supreme Court bar. The other person who you shouldn't forget, who is also, as you know, argued some years ago at great length in the Supreme Court, is Mr. Parasaran, his other fellow traveller from what was then called Madras. There was a third person who was a complete contrast, G. Ramaswamy.
Yes.
I knew GR well. And GR and Venu were very close friends. GR always spoke very highly of, no, my old friend is Venu, I say, I really like Venu, I say. And GR was a complete rascal, but a very lovable one. So the Madras bar has also given us very illustrious counsel.
I want to ask you something, that Venugopal is 25 years older than you, and you have spent a considerable time at the bar. It's a long career. Even at your age, somebody who spent 25 years more at the bar.
Yeah, but he's worked constantly much more than I ever have. So it's not a comparable career. But
Yeah. So, what does it take? You have spent a lifetime, and he is 25 years more than you, sort of. What does it take for all of you people to go that far? In Venu's case, what do you think?
Let me tell you. To put your question in a slightly different way. Now put it, say, in the context of a Sorabji. Sorabji was born with the proverbial silver gold spoon in his mouth.
Yes.
He had all the money in the world.
Yes.
Money didn't matter to him.
Yes.
Soli and Fali, at a certain level, were never crazy about money. It came and it went. Soli always wanted fame.
Yes.
There was that. You see, to stay in the profession for so long and be at it for so long, you have to have 2-3 things. That's my view. One, you have to enjoy what you're doing.
Yes.
So all three of them would have enjoyed what they were doing. Soli always craved fame. I remember once, I told Soli, Are, Zia is doing very well. Zia was his daughter, Zia Modi, his daughter. What is the use in a firm? She should be arguing. You don't need the money. You need the fame. Those were his words to me. So, Soli had that. Nariman also basically, the law at the end of the day was his life. It was just a partnership between him and his profession. It was, unlike Rohinton, who has a penchant for music, literature, reads up, comparative religion, is deeply religious. Senior Nariman had not too many other passions.
Law.
The law, the development of the law, his ascendancy in the law, his desire to be the dominant person of his generation in that space, that is what drives you. And Venu must be having I don't know him so well personally, so I don't want to think, but Venu would be having the same. Basically, you like what you're doing, you like being on top, and you want to stay that way.
Okay, point well taken. Any other anecdotes about KK Venugopal that we must know, the viewers must know, that you would like to share about him, his life, his work?
It's a very sad thing, but he was one of the most devoted, Mr. and Mrs. Venugopal were one of the most devoted couple I've ever seen. I saw Mrs. Venugopal for a short while before she got cancer and passed on. He was a completely devoted husband.
How many years ago she?
Well, I was in the bar. I joined in '79. I don't remember, but now I think
it's been a while. It's a long
1 or 2 years,
right.
And then she moved on.
Yeah.
And he was just completely devoted to her. His whole thing, even his house, which he built. We built it when the Swadeshi case was going on. Been named after her. He's a very, very devoted couple and a very, very nice man. That's all I can say about him.
Okay. So, what is the learning that a lot of generation of lawyers must take from the life of KK Venugopal when they see him arguing, or somebody like you see him arguing in the Supreme Court at the age of 93?
See, the learning is only this. That the first thing that you must acknowledge is that the old timers were a breed apart.
Is it?
I think so.
Yes.
I think so. The old timers were a breed apart. They first, they had very few distractions.
Yes.
The law was their day to day. It was, whether it was, they would get up, they would study the law. See, the law was also more manageable in those days. As Rohinton once pointed out about Jamshedji Kanga, he said, everyone says Jamshedji has a huge and fantastic memory. And even when they want to contrast it to, say, Ashok Sen. But, and I'll give you Ashok Sen's example also. But Jamshedji Kanga, he said, Rohinton told me, he said, but everything, the whole library was basically in 4 or 5 cupboards, Indian appeals. He knew all of that. Ashok Sen, in fact, was the most legendarily well-read advocate in independent India has ever seen. I still remember that one day the puja holidays were about to start and I was in court and I said that, "Sir, where are you going for the holidays?" So he said, "No, Ryan, I'm not going anywhere because I'm staying back and reading because I'm behind on my New Zealand law reports."
Oh my God!
Yeah,
He's keeping up with his law now.
Yeah. So that was how he was.
So that's that. Thank you for sharing all these anecdotes about KK Venugopal. For my viewers and for me personally, it was an enlightening experience. Thank you for your time and thank you for being on Legally Speaking. Thank you. Now on 93 Not Out, we are joined by one of India's most successful commercial lawyers, namely Senior Advocate Parag Tripathi. And the reason he is here today is not to speak on what he did in court, but he will speak to us on his senior, namely K.K. Venugopal, who served as the Attorney General of India. And without wasting much time, I would request Mr. Parag Tripathi to speak firstly about his early memories of KKV, as he is affectionately called, and then move on to the later anecdotes. Over to you, sir.
What a pleasure to talk to you, Tarun, after a long time. I remember not so long ago, there was someone who had said that he is what he is because of Venugopal Sahib, as you said, fondly called KKV. And somebody responded, why blame KKV? So therefore, I am very, very cagey about saying I am what I am because of him, because I may get a similar response. That having been said, I think because I had the privilege of working in his chambers for almost 7 years plus, he has had a great impact and effect at the professional level, personal level, and indeed at the level of psyche, because he is a very multifaceted personality. And I firmly believe that the Guru Shishya Parampara really continues in good chambers. And I think the chambers of Mr. Venugopal is as good as it can be. That having been said, it was not an easy chamber to work in. He was extremely hard as a taskmaster. Hard not in the sense of ever being rude or crude or angry, but hard because there was that subliminal feeling that if you do anything but the best, you have let him down, and therefore let yourself down. And that's a terrible feeling to have. I'll give you an example. I had just finished my LLM at the Harvard Law School, and naturally, like all young men, thought a lot about myself. I've now become wiser and realized that's the most silly thing you can do. And Mr. Venugopal called me. He introduced me around, including to some of his juniors who were in Chennai, that here's a bright man from Harvard who has joined me. I took that a little too seriously. And he told me, Parag, I think I want a judgment on a case which I had argued before the full court in Madras. Anybody can be the prime minister. So I said, sir, anybody can be the chief minister. What I mean is that you don't have to be an MLA to be a chief minister. All right. Otherwise, I will ask my junior in Madras, he will give me the judgment. So I said, how can that be? Very well. So I tried to look it up. Those were not the days. I think that was I joined him in 86. I was there till 92, 93. This would be about 87, 88. Or maybe beginning of 87. And I had then just a lady junior who had joined me. The poor lady had got married recently, but she was also a tough lawyer and she wanted to make her mark. And we sat in the chambers of my senior and we tried to look up this judgment. Didn't get it. So we said, all right, we will follow the great Lord Hanumana and bring the whole mountain. So we started looking at MLJ year after year. So Mr. Venugopal left the office because we were in the library then, and the library didn't have full air conditioning as it had now. And he says, what are you doing? I said, sir, you told me this. You can't do this. You can't spend so much of time. It's such a simple point. Anybody will get it. So that gave me an existential question. I mean, will I ever survive in this profession? It was such an obvious point. To cut the long story short, I worked till about 11. He came down for some magazine. He told me, just go home. I came up early morning. And then he said, what is this? Then he called up his junior in Chennai. He was a very distinguished lawyer called Manivannan and said, remember, now, those days we had the telephones. So you could hear the voice come through the telephone. He said, yes, sir, I remember. This was the matter. This was the cause title. I said, oh my God, I've completely missed it. And anyway, we had faxes, so the judgment came. I rang up Mr. Manivan. He said, "You are that fellow?" I said, "Sir, I was that fellow, but I think I have no hope here because I couldn't get it in any reported, in any case, in any journal." He said, "Sir knows it's not reported case." So I barged in. He was then having a conference, I still remember, with Pallavi Shroff. And I said, "Sir, can I disturb you?" He said, "I've got that judgment." I said, "Sir, but it was not reported." He said, "I never told you it was reported." Now, there's so much to learn from that. There's so much to learn is that in law, you cannot have fixed notions that if somebody is telling you about a judgment, it must be reported. It must be reported in this journal. No, you have to have a bigger view that there is this judgment and you have to find it. It may be reported, it may not be reported. Who knows? That mystery of law is there. And of course, that reaffirmed my faith in myself for whatever it was worth, that I do have some chance in this profession. Now, coming back to Venugopal, the man, and I'll take the liberty of calling him as Venugopal because he's, of course, our Guruji, as one of our very dear friend calls him. So, or it's better to call him Guruji. So, if you think of Guruji as a man, he doesn't have that great flair of public speaking. His presentation, his quote is not full of anecdotal wits, like anecdotal wit which you have of Daftari or others. But what he has is an immensely focused approach to law, which is fabulous. When he works with a focus. I'm reminded of Arjun and the eye of the bird. He's completely focused. When he argues, he builds. I used to tell my colleagues and my own chamber juniors, because while I was working with him, as in case of so many others, I had my own juniors too. I tell them that I call it the boa constrictor approach. That is the Python approach. He will build step by step the argument and then squeeze it. So then there's nothing left for the opponent to do. It's over. And that was his beauty. He would think a point through to its conclusion. Right through. Most of us, we get a judgment or a point. We think up to a point, we are very happy, we make that point, and the judge on the other side then finds a loophole and we are stumped. He thinks it through. And that means a dedication which is fabulous. I remember, and with it is utter honesty. He was the person who sometimes is associated with getting the fees of senior advocates unshackled from a blessed 1,680 rupees, which some of the leading members of the bar, all of whom had come from Bombay, had fixed. But of course, some of them, I'm told, would take multiple fees if there's a batch matter. Mr. Venugopal, on the other hand, increased the fees and made it realistic. Now, of course, the fees is what it is, so I'm not going there. He also structured a new way of preparation. Earlier, you would have X as your fees for argument. You could make it 2X if you want, perhaps 3X, but that's what it is. His structure was that if you work on a matter, have conferences, you can then fully focus on the matter because his whole approach is focusing. His approach is not just reading something. We have some very good lawyers who, I remember the story of A.K. Sen and Daftari, who could just argue a matter just while being briefed in the corridor. I don't think Mr. Venugopal or Guruji, as we call him, ever did that. It is something which was a matter of religion. You cannot just be briefed in the corridor because it's not fair to the client. It's not fair certainly to you. It's not fair to the court. So he had that sense of innate fairness, and he structured this methodology of getting prepared over a series of conferences. And when he said the conference is from 9 to 5, believe me, Tarun, it meant 9 to 5. Even me, who was called the great distractor in his chamber, because I would talk of this and that and get him off the conference, because otherwise he would say, I told you to do this, where is it? We could only do so much. So instead of confessing I couldn't do it, the idea was if we catch him on some story or the other. So after about 2 minutes, he say, Parag, that's a very nice point, we'll do it after 5 o'clock. Now tell me, have you done the work which I gave you? So his focus was something which you learned. And there was that dedicated honesty about that focus. Yes, he charged for his conferences, but he delivered 150%. I don't remember ever a client going dissatisfied in his conference. It is unthinkable that in his conference he will start doing something else, have an early lunch, then have tea, then gossip. Never. His dedicated bulk conference time, which meant a whole day, which also meant sometimes going out of Delhi and preparing, was bulk conference time. It was very serious stuff. So he has this great dedication to the profession, to his own name, to his own sense of right and wrong. And of course, he charged his fees, which I think is the right thing to do. And he did a great deal of pro bono work, which is again extraordinary. I remember he told us a story when he was a much younger lawyer. He was arguing something before, I think, a bench of Justices Gajendra Garkar and Subbarao. And he was making a point which somehow Chief Justice Gajendra Garkar was not catching on to. So he finally said, "I'm sorry, my lord," once or twice. Justice Gajendra Garkar was one of our great judges and great Chief Justices. He said, "Mr. Venugopal, why should you be sorry? There's no need for you to be sorry." And I believe Justice Subbarao whispered to him that in the southern states, when we say sorry, we mean that you have not understood what I'm saying. So Chief Justice Gajendra Garkar said, "Then say so." Because he was from Maharashtra. He believed in a blunt, then say that I have not understood. What is this sorry? Why should you say sorry? So, and he had a great sense of humor. He was a very generous host. Can you imagine? Or he never, as a matter of rule, invited sitting judges for dinner because he thought that is not correct. He would always invite judges after they laid down office. In all his such dinners, except dinners which were for personal friends, he would invite his existing chamber and also his ex-chamber. I'm not aware of very many others who even think of doing that. So he is a great father figure. I keep on saying was because was is when I was his junior technically. But in a Gurukul, once you have been in a Gurukul, you're always a junior. So I think is a better expression. Now, to give you an interesting insight, when I joined him, he had one great paranoia, that of public speaking. And that was largely self-created. So he told me, "You prepare my speeches." So there was a period of about 6 months to a year and sometimes a little more, where I would prepare his speeches with a lot of flair. He would cut down the flair. And then he realized that he could speak much better than what I could prepare for his speeches. So I should have been a little more guarded because that I lost a big brownie point which I had. But he always appreciated that. That was the other great thing. He would argue a matter, and if a junior would give him a good point, he would tell the court that I am grateful to my junior for researching this point. He has that magnanimity of heart, which is extraordinary. I'll give you one more example. He's a very dear friend, Justice Santosh Hegde, who was earlier the Solicitor General of India, then, of course, a direct elevation to the Supreme Court. At that time, he was in Bangalore practicing there. I think he was the Advocate General, or maybe had just laid down office. So he invited Guruji for dinner and also me, because he told him my junior has come. So I think we were at ITC Windsor. I happily bought a cake and signed it off with a great flourish. So he looked at me and he said, "You want to eat a cake in the room?" I said, "No, sir, I'm taking it from Mr. Hegde." But then you don't sign it off and put it in the room. And I was fairly nonplussed. Now I realize that's correct. So he then said, he took out his card. He had a credit card then, we didn't. Paid my bill by his card. What a man. It's not a question of that whatever 400, 600 rupees. It's a question of principle. That yes, if you're taking a gift, which for a personal dinner, don't mug the client with it. Charge your client whatever is your fees. But not this. He's one of the very few people I know who flew first class from back those days. And first class means a huge amount of expenditure. Whenever he would stay on his various visits abroad, he would pick up the best suite or the most expensive room. I remember once when there was a UI conference, my good friend, Mr. Vaidyanathan, who also comes from the same Gurukul and is my senior, he was also there. This was Istanbul. I was there. So in keeping with our respective statuses, Mr. Venugopal, that is Guruji, picked up the suite one below the presidential suite because he said presidential suite is too much of expenditure. And of course, that is from his own pocket. Mr. Vaidyanathan, I think, picked up something like 500, 600 euros, and yours truly picked up something like 180 euros, which was the farthest away. So he called us to his suite. They upgraded him to the presidential suite. And he said, let's have a Turkish dinner. And he rang up the restaurant, which was a very popular restaurant, though posh but popular. And you are calling at around 7 o'clock for a table at 7:45. So he says, they say, oh, we are very sorry, we don't have a table. So I said, sir, may I try? He said, yes. And then he immediately regretted it because he told Vaidyanathan sir, this man is going to do something funny, you stop him. So I rang up, I said, look, I'm Venugopal, I'm staying in your presidential suite. Have you seen it? Tell him not to talk like this. This commentary is going on side by side. Tell him not to talk like this. My reputation is at stake. He said, yes, sir. Now I want a table right next to the Bosphorus. Of course, sir, we have it. And I'm sure you will also give us your house wine compliment. No, I don't want complimentary house wine. Tell him to stop immediately. So, and I said, and I expect to be picked up from the elevator when we come down. He said, now, Parag, you just leave the phone. Otherwise, I'm not coming for dinner. So I said, we are coming. See, that is the man. He felt so embarrassed. How can you ask for complimentary wine? And I said, well, if you're paying, and I think he was paying some 3,500 euros those days. It was a big deal of money. This is normal stuff because I'm not pocketing it and hiding it and running away from it. I'm asking them upfront that I'm staying in your presidential suite. That's the least. And the guy came and he said, sir, actually, why house wine? We have two beautiful red and white wine. That time I was not a vino. I had no particular liking for wine. We'll open them for you. So you know what Mr. Venugopal did? Guruji went and bought a very expensive 280 euro bottle just so that they should not feel that we are filched from their collection of wines. That is the kind of man he is. And he actually laughed. He enjoyed it. He also felt that this is terrible. You should never do this. But that is the kind of man he is. And we learned so much from him in so many ways. I remember I've had personally, I've had three great experiences in my life. My parents, who taught me what principles are. My school principal and vice principal, I studied at the Sardar Patel Vidyalaya, Raghubhai and Jashiben Naik. They used to make us stand in the sun and give us lectures on patriotism. And we used to joke about it. But it sort of goes in. And this 7 years of experience with Guruji, where everything comes back to you because you realize how things are. He contested the election. The strict condition was no campaigning. Can you imagine Supreme Court Bar Association election, no campaigning, forget dinner. Dinner comes much later, no dinner, no campaigning, nothing. So he is that kind of a person. He's extraordinary in so many ways. One more interesting thing stands out, which I was discussing with you before we started talking. I remember I was not there with him physically at that point of time. I was, of course, in Guruji's chamber. He used to appear regularly for Dr. J. Jayalalitha. And I think it was 98 to 2004 when Bajpayee finally got, or 99 to 2004, his full 5 years. And Jayalalitha was supporting the government. So she called him apparently and said that, Mr. Venugopal, I want you to be the Attorney General. Now, that was the only trophy missing from his very illustrious cupboard of trophies and achievements. And this is 1999. The offer came again almost 2 decades later. You know what he said? He said that, look, it's very sweet of you, but an Attorney General has to have the confidence of the government, which means in this case, the majority partner. They have to ask. So Dr. Jayalalitha, I guess, being a politician, consummate politician, said that you don't worry. What I say will be done. He said, I have no doubt it will be done, but that may not be correct. Can you imagine? I have never been offered like this, but had I been offered, I would have said yes and thought about whether it is right or wrong later. This is the man. I can't give you a better example than this. Extraordinary. And then later on, she offered him a Rajya Sabha membership. That he gently declined, because you can't decline it upfront. Very gently declined, because he says, I don't want an obligation that I have come as so-and-so nominee. I want to retain my independence. So these are aspects which are extraordinary and which you can never really forget. I remember I had a heart problem and there are a couple of stents inside me. So he came home along with my good friend Vaidyanathan. And you know what he said? He said, now 5 days have happened. I said, yes, sir. This was Friday evening. You must have taken briefs from Monday. I said, yes, sir. You return all of them. This is my order to you. Take 4 weeks off. It doesn't matter. This is not a 100-meter race that you will lose anything. This is a marathon, our legal profession. And I think in that sense, I owe my life to him. Because I had actually taken work. I actually did not, I returned all the briefs because as a junior, you have this blind faith. He tells you to jump, you'll jump. Even now. I'm absolutely sure even now if he tells me, Parag, come out, there's a water tank there, jump into it, I'll do it. Because you have that, there is that connect. And I think that helped me because I realized over the next 2 to 3 weeks how weak you have been, how much it takes to come out of it. And I have had a very dear friend who very unfortunately got back into work immediately and we lost him. So he has this level of concern. And we have, of course, had some extraordinary visits with him in later years when, again, Mr. Vaidyanathan, of course, was there. When we went to Lake Como, where there used to be a marquee wine tasting. That's the only time, there are only 50 paid seats and the best people from the world come. That's the only time I was elevated to the front row because of him. Because he sat on the front row. So therefore the organizers said that, all right, we can also have his Man Friday sit next to him. And he enjoyed his wines. That is the great thing about Guruji. He doesn't like wines. But when he tastes a superior wine, he's immediately able to tell you that this is a superior wine. Because he's like that. And I can, of course, go on for the next 1 hour. But I think I've given you enough of a snapshot.
Thank you, really.
I'll end, as I always do, with a couplet. What is it that one learned from his chamber? What you learned from his chamber was hard work, faith in yourself, ability to do work, and the famous couplet of Allama Iqbal. Shaheen hai tu, you are an eagle. Parwaaz hai maqam tera. Your destination is flight. Tere liye asman aur bhi. There is limitless opportunity for growth for you. This is what you learn from this chapter. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that exposition. It indeed was a delight to watch you speak. And indeed, I experience a part of what the judges of the Supreme Court witness day after day. An exposition by Senior Advocate Parag Tripathi. Thank you so much. And indeed, KKV's life is an inspiration to all of us. When we see him arguing at the age of 93 in the Supreme Court, amazing. I think that is something that anyone across...
I'll just tell you, he argued that DMRC curative petition, he led us, and of course the London Attorney General also argued. And in rejoinder, he argued with 100 degrees Fahrenheit fever, 101. That is his commitment. And my ambition in life is to give you another interview for his 100th year.
Look forward to that. I think we will soon enough do a show on 100 years of KKV and him arguing in the Supreme Court. Look forward to that. Appreciate your joining us and sharing all these anecdotes with us. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.